Hello, and welcome to Lexington Remembers. Today is Monday, October 17th, 2016. I am Beverly Kelley, and I'm here with my husband, Peter, and we are very excited and honored to have a longtime Lexington resident with us today by the name of Dan Fenn. Actually, Dan is a member of the Lexington Remembers Committee, and he has done interviewed probably half of the interviews that we've done. He has been the interviewee. Today, he's been the interviewer. Today, he is the interviewee. And we are delighted to have...
Escape me.
All of us.
Some of you may know Dan, but for those of you who don't, he is a distinguished, he has had a distinguished career, both in politics and in education, both at the national level and locally. He worked for some time with Eleanor Roosevelt, and he worked with John F. Kennedy. After his years in Washington, he came back to Lexington and continued his political career in Lexington, and at 93, he is still going strong. And we are delighted to have Dan with us this afternoon. So I think at this point, I'll let Peter start things going.
First, Dan, thanks for being part of this and being on that side of the microphone for a change.
Well, thank you.
It should be an interesting afternoon.
I feel uncomfortable. I have to
Well, maybe we'll keep that up for you.
Hey, we just got another Nobel laureate in town.
Right.
We did.
And those people are much more interesting than I am.
I disagree with that.
I don't think that's going to be the case. But to get started, Dan, could you just sort of give us your early years background? Where did you grow up, the activities that you were involved with, and your time in university or time during World War II, and actually what got you to come to Lexington initially?
Well, starting with the last part of your question, Peter, that's really easy. When I was in the 5th grade, maybe 6th grade, in those days, part of the curriculum was to memorize poetry, and they had us, my English teacher, Mr. Coriel, who lived actually in that Greek Revival house right on the edge of Tower Park on Mass Ave.
Right at the corner of Mass Ave and Merritt?
Yeah, right across the street there. Beautiful house. So he was our English teacher and headmaster at the lower school, and he had us learning Paul Revere's Ride. And I was completely taken with it. And I remember my father taking me to the Old North Church and to Paul Revere's house and all that. And so I always vowed that one day I would live here. So I moved here in 1949 with my wife and small child, Peter, my oldest. Before that, my father was a 5th-generation Unitarian minister, and I don't remember too much about Augusta, Maine, except a heck of a lot of snow. And then we moved to Taunton, Mass, and then we were in Chestnut Hill. Father had that church there, and one of his parishioners was Leverett Saltonstall, and he was Speaker of the House at the time, and so the Speaker chose the chaplain. And since my father was his minister, Father became the chaplain of the house. And I'd go in with him sometimes. We'd start in the Speaker's office and stand on the dais, and that looked like pretty good fun to me. So Leverett Saltonstall was my great political hero growing up, and I worked in his campaigns to a degree that a 12-year-old kid couldn't do anything.
Did you ever get any pressure from your father, since he was a fifth-generation Unitarian minister? Any pressure to go into the clergy?
No, I'm sure he would have been pleased, but he was pleased with whatever
the direction you
three of
took.
us did.
Right.
And
So you had two siblings, it sounds like.
yeah, I had a brother who's 12 years younger than I am. He's out in Minneapolis. And a sister who was a couple of years younger. She died some years ago. Cancer. She was a dear. So John didn't come along until Chestnut Hill. And then my parents moved to Cambridge. I went to college 1940, and the next year they moved to Cambridge because we don't have bishops in the Unitarian denomination, but he would have been a bishop because he was head of the department of the ministry, and he helped place ministers and choose ministers and things like that.
So you started college in 1940,
Right.
and then when the war came, there must have been an interruption of your college.
Yes, for all of us.
So what happened there?
Well, I joined, so I couldn't get into the Navy V-12 program and some things like that because of my eyes. So I joined something called the Enlisted Reserve Corps. And listen, this wasn't exactly big heroism, I must say. But the Enlisted Reserve Corps, you joined up, you volunteered, you joined up, got sworn in the summer of 1941, 42. And then you stayed in college until they called you up, until they needed you. And that sort of made sense to me, As I was there, I was set to go when they wanted me. So in March 11, 1943, they gave us a little warning. They called up the Enlisted Reserve Corps. Now, I don't know if you remember Jimmy Lambie. Jimmy Lambie lived in town, lived on Shade Street, Jimmy and Nancy. He was in the group that went to Fort Devens that day.
So you didn't know him before you went to Fort Devens?
Yeah, I knew him from school.
Oh, you did?
Oh, okay. He was in your school.
Yep.
And where did you do your pre-college education?
Well, I was at Harvard. Listen, I mean, like where else?
No, I mean, did you go to public high school?
Oh, no, and then I went to Brown Nichols, which is now
BB&M.
Brown.
Right.
Right. Okay.
From
so-
fifth grade on. And there's a classmate of mine, probably the only surviving one, lives in Brookhaven, Ben Wright. We see a lot of each other.
Good.
We met in the fifth grade. And it was in the fifth or sixth grade when I met my best friend through school and college, Jimmy Conant. And his father became president of Harvard. And I remember he was at Shady Hill School, which was right adjoining. And we were having baseball practice, at which I was horrible. Well, I was horrible at all sports. I didn't distinguish.
That wasn't your thing.
I
right.
loved crew, and I did a lot was rowing. But anyway, there was I remember it so well, it was lying on the field, there was a baseball glove. it said on it, genuine horsehide. So I said, who around here is genuine horsehide? So Jimmy came up. And
Jimmy's.
we were very dear friends through the war. And
So in 43
Really,
then you got called up and
In
you went to
42.
Italy, is that what I understand?
yeah, I was this wonderful hat here. We didn't have anything fancy like this, but this was a hat from one of the reunions, and I was in the it looks kind of silly, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't.
I was in the 461st Bomb Group, 767 Bomb Squadron, B-24 Liberators. I was a sergeant. I did nothing heroic to save Western civilization.
But you served.
And we went over on a Liberty ship. Things were so different then. We left Hampton Roads, Virginia, on a Liberty ship built really as a troop ship. They were all built as troop ships. Took us a month, buttoned down because of the submarines and stuff. 5 bunks in a heap. Ran into a terrible storm off Hatteras. Everybody was sick. It was charming. We had 50-gallon drums, and everybody was throwing
I know.
up in the 50-gallon.
Let's move right along.
Yeah,
here.
right. So
All right.
then you came back after being in Italy, and did you finish your college education when you came back?
That's right.
Okay, at Harvard.
That's right.
And you got your undergraduate degree, and then
What year?
Yeah, what year was that?
Well, I
Calendar.
came back. I left on March 11th. I had a 3-day pass before I shipped out to Miami Beach for basic training. And they kept saying, you're going to get leave, you're going to get leave. Well, I never got any leave. So I got home on Halloween night in 1945.
5. Okay.
2.5 years later. And I remember my parents said, they were living in Cambridge, they said, do you want us to pick you up at Fort Devens? I said, no. And I remember it so well. I took the train from Devens to the North Station and took the subway to Cambridge, stopped in the square and got my shoe shine and walked through the yard and back to my home for the first time in
2.5 years.
months and
Yeah.
months and months.
Yeah.
And they've been going to celebrate Halloween, all the stuff was put away on the bedroom upstairs. I said, I'm sorry to interfere with the Halloween celebration, but they didn't seem to mind much.
So that was the first time you got home during your whole service during World War
right.
II.
That's
Right.
right.
Well, I can't imagine they minded all that.
And the communicating was. I decided I was at Hammer Field near Fresno in California, Christmas of 1943, and I decided I'd call home for Christmas Eve. Well, I get on the phone, and it took a half an hour because the operator in Fresno had to get in touch with the operator in Los Angeles, and the operator in Los Angeles got in touch with the operator in Chicago, and the operator in Chicago got in touch with the operator in Boston, and the Boston operator got in touch with the Cambridge operator, and got finally to my house. Writing, we had things called V-mails, and there were sheets about, standard size, and you'd write on them, then one of the officers would censor them, and then they got reduced somehow with a camera, I guess. And it took about 2 weeks to get the emails from me to my parents.
Right.
There was you could call if there was a big emergency. The Red Cross would arrange for a call, but my grandmother died, and that wasn't a big enough emergency.
Really?
So when you think of people overseas now,
Today, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just totally different.
You can talk to
So you-
anybody anytime.
So
all
you,
over
what
the
year
world.
did you graduate from, get your undergraduate degree?
46.
46.
46.
And then what happened at that point? Were you starting to get involved in politics at all,
You
or?
know how once in a while in your life you make a conscious decision. I'd been president of the Harvard Crimson, the newspaper, daily newspaper, and there was a new magazine opening up in Washington called The Reporter. Became very popular, and I thought, well, and there was reason to think I could have gotten a job in journalism there. But I thought, no, I'd rather do stuff than write about it. Crucial decision in my life.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I was trying to get a job at the United Nations or State Department or something like that. And the dean of freshmen at Harvard, Del Layton, called and said, would I like to be an assistant dean of freshmen? Well, that was pretty heady, you know.
You were how old at the time? Like 20?
46. I would have been 23. I was the second youngest in Harvard history.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was pretty big stuff.
So you said yes.
So I said yes. So I was an assistant dean for 3 years, and during that time got my master's degree.
So it was during
okay.
that tenure of service, working at Harvard, that you moved to Lexington?
No, because that was 46. Well, I was just finishing it up,
Oh, I see.
actually. I moved here in the fall of 1949. Little house on Fair Oaks Drive up on the top of Loring Hill.
Yep.
Long gone. Big mansion now.
Probably,
Yeah.
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 Louis Zane, remember Louis
I
Zane?
certainly do.
He lived up there.
right at the foot of
Right.
Right.
Fair Oaks Drive.
Right, Fair Oaks Terrace.
Yeah.
So
Well, the Potters, Bill Potter
Right.
lived on Fair Oaks Terrace,
Right, right.
and Tom Carroll. And it was nice because it was a cul-de-sac.
Quiet.
So everybody
Yeah.
knew everybody.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you saw people out raking leaves or whatever.
Well, after your 3 years of assistant dean of freshmen, and you moved to Lexington in the fall of '49, what were you doing then? What was your career point then?
I had, along with the job at Harvard, been part-time director of something called the Foreign Policy Association. And they had Saturday luncheons at the Costly Pleasure, we used to call it, Coffee Plaza,
the costly
in the
plaza.
ballroom. And then big, fancy luncheons with speakers on foreign policy things. And they decided that they ought to do a little bit more than just those luncheons. So they hired me, and I had developed some connections with the unions, with Frank Levine at AFL-CIO and Bill Belanger, and there was a woman who lived on Bow Street, Frances somebody, who worked in the AFL-CIO office, very nice lady. So I got some programs on foreign affairs and free trade and stuff going with the Massachusetts unions.
Is this where Eleanor Roosevelt came in? Because
Well,
wasn't
through
it?
the World Affairs Council,
Yeah.
I mean, working with her is a sort of a stretch. She was wonderful, though. We did a lot of program, and we would ask her to come and do a talk or something, and then I'd pick her up in the airport and drive her back and chat with her, got to know her, and I saw her at Valkill and Hyde Park a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. She, the most exciting time was a guy named Paul Keyes worked for WNAC, and he later wrote for Laugh-In. And he got this terrific idea to get all the radio stations in Boston on United Nations Day broadcasting the same show. And the show was a little dramatic thing starring Eleanor Roosevelt on human rights, and Basil Rathbone, you remember him?
The actor.
He used to play Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, he had the
and
hat,
various
the
other
Sherlock
things.
Holmes hat, yeah.
And his daughter, and a columnist from the New York Post named Leonard Lyons. And so Keyes wrote this thing, and we put it on at Liberty Mutual Hall in Boston, and it was taped then, and all the stations in Boston broadcasted on UN Day. And Mrs. Roosevelt was wonderful. She was so cooperative, you know.
Okay.
When she wasn't rehearsing, I remember the afternoon rehearsal, she was sitting over in a corner, catnap. She'd take a catnap, and then they'd call her, and she'd do her thing, and then she did it that evening.
So she was a warm and gracious woman, would you say?
She was so interesting. She had no airs about her. She was usually sort of disheveled, you know. I don't think she was dressed by some
Yeah, probably.
Oscar de la Renta.
Right, probably not.
Very willing, committed to whatever cause she was involved in. Vera caused a lot of trouble with Kennedy.
No.
She came to like him, but she didn't. She was a Stevenson person.
Adlai Stevenson.
Something that at the end of her life, her doctor, I've read, said to her, well, Mrs. Roosevelt, I can keep you going. You don't have not going to be able to do anything. And she said, well, if I'm not going to be able to do anything, what's the point?
Yeah. Weren't you on the school committee in Lexington, too?
Well, yeah, I got elected to the school committee in, 60, perhaps 57.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And I was in town meeting.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you had children in the school system at that point.
Yeah, and I was continued to be really interested in politics. I did an article that needed more politicians on school committees, which was not all that popular at the time. And I you know, it was interesting. You may remember that about a quarter to a third of Lexington people were Democrats, but they were so ashamed of it, and they would. So no Democrats ever turned up in primaries because you didn't want anybody to know you were a Democrat, and because it just wasn't done.
Yeah, it was a Republican town.
And so I thought, hey, listen, this is a bunch of nonsense. What can we do to make it respectable to be a Democrat in town? So we got going with the town committee and the club and activities and programs and stuff like that. And I had Jim Barry,
Sure.
Marion Coletta, Woodrow
Broadhead?
Wilson's
Oh.
grandson.
Woodrow Wilson's grandson?
Yeah, was deeply involved.
Well, so, what was Lexington like? It was a town with going through quite a transition between a farming community and a active, growing suburb.
Well, it
Right.
was about
Once-
12,000 people when we moved here, and
And
Loring Hill, all the backup, because Worthing Road didn't exist,
Right.
right,
and the high school didn't exist.
right. Was it Muzzy?
And my son Peter used to call that area where the high school now is the Black Lagoon,
Well,
because it was wetland.
Peter
It was all
grew.
Pete.
Peter
was
grew
all
up right near there, and his mother grew up there on Clark
that
Street
was
and
the
used to
chief
play
land.
there.
Yeah.
You remember Ruth Morey, right?
Oh, very well.
Were you on school committee when she was?
No, I was on with Mildred Merrick and Gordon Steele. And
Oh, yeah,
Sam
Gordon Steele.
Brown and
Yeah.
Okay.
that crowd.
Crowd. Okay, but there was
So-
quite a lot of school building going on in
Oh,
those
my
days.
Lord.
Well-
Peter went to 5 elementary schools in 5 years.
Oh wow.
Well, talk about redistricting. It's a big topic
Oh,
today. You know.
it was. I remember I had a lot to do with choosing a superintendent to take Jack Smith's place when he went on after Tom Grindle, superintendent. And we found this wonderful guy, Medill Bear, from New Hope, Pennsylvania. Later went on to be superintendent in Santa Barbara and Hartford, Connecticut. He was terrific. And I remember, I guess it was at Muzzy, in when that was assembly hall downstairs, and I remember him sitting on the stage, and town was going crazy over the taxes because building a school every year, and it wasn't any state help in those days.
No.
And somebody said, "Well, Mr. Bear, what can we do about these taxes, the expense of these schools?" And Medill, big smile on his face, he said, "Well, retroactive birth control."
There's a plan for you. Okay.
So getting back to town meeting, you mentioned that very briefly. What year did you first become a town meeting member? Or about what year? Because you still are a town
Let's
meeting
see,
member.
I
But-
ran once and got beaten. I ran for state rep in 52, probably 53.
The mid-50s.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you had to give it up for a while because you moved down to Washington.
Well,
so
yeah.
do
I
you,
resigned from the school committee and
Oh.
from town meeting in 61.
and why did you resign? And why
Well,
don't we
'cause I
go
was
into that?
leaving town.
Right. And you were going down to work for Kennedy in the White
Right,
House.
right.
How did you make that connection now?
Well, I'd been involved with him since I met him 49, and then again in 54, and then worked on peripherally on some of his projects in the 50s. So we had a friendship, and kind of friendship you have in politics. I remember the commencement in 1960, about 3 weeks before. I was an alternate delegate at Los Angeles, but about 3 weeks before the convention, again, how different things are. We passed in the middle of Harvard Yard, and he was all dolled up, and because he was an overseer, but he had no entourage. Nobody was with him. He had no secret service,
Really?
nothing, and he was just a few weeks from being the Democratic nominee.
He was a senator.
Yeah, he was senator. So he said, "Oh, Dan, you were out in Wisconsin for that primary out there last winter." And I said, "Yeah, Jack, boy," because it was always Jack before he was elected president. Then it was always Mr. President. "Yeah, Jack," I said, "it's a long way between people out there." And he laughed and he said, "Yeah, and they're not that friendly when you meet them either." So it was that, a kind of connection.
And when he got elected, one of his...
They asked me, he didn't,
No.
to take over his Boston office for his successor in the Senate, Ben Smith.
Okay.
So I ran the Boston office for a few months, half-time. That was fun. And then I was teaching and doing some writing at Harvard Business School, and I got a call, and a guy named Ralph Dungan in that picture we've got. And I said, "Oh, hi, Ralph. I thought I was on your ad list." And he said, "Oh, contraire. Yeah, that's Ralph. He was later ambassador to Chile." The thing that's interesting about the White House in those days, the president's staff was 77 people. I've got the list. And a lot of those were typists,
Clerical, yeah.
And oddball things like the President's Commission on Physical Fitness and stuff like that. So it was really small, and you'd see him around the office the way you see any boss around the office.
So this is you over here.
That's right.
And what's this fellow's name again?
Ralph Dungan.
Ralph
And who's
Dungan.
this fellow here?
Yeah, exactly.
So this was taken in what,
Who's that
61?
fellow with Dungan? Probably 63.
63.
And the spring or summer. And I asked people, "What do you think we were doing?" And talking about the missile crisis. Yeah, we were having our picture taken for an article in the Saturday Evening Post.
Oh.
And what he's saying to Ralph is, "Stop picking your nose, Ralph. You're having your picture taken."
He always was concerned about image, wasn't he?
That's right. Yeah, when he was having, he was very conscious of
Image.
What was it like working in the White House?
Well, it was very exciting. A friend of mine and Henry Petro standing at the stoplight at Waltham Street and Mass Ave. A couple of Lexington people standing in front of him. And he overheard him say, one said, "Did you hear about Fenn?" And the other one said, "Yeah." And the first one said, "Could have been worse, you know." This was when the story came out that I was going to the White House. "Could have been worse, you know." He says, "How?" First one said, "Could have been elected selectman."
He didn't hang around long enough, did he?
That's right. Yeah, it was very exciting.
Yeah, yeah, right.
What?
And
Did you hear the story today about we have that half a clover leaf at Waltham Street and half a clover leaf at Spring Street on Route 2?
Oh, yes, right.
Yeah.
That was
And
in
then-
the 60s when they...
Yeah, and then Hayden Avenue.
Right.
okay.
Our very dear friend, Irving Maybe, was
Oh, he was a
chairman.
dear friend of
Oh,
mine.
God, he was wonderful.
Christine was a good friend of mine.
He was my best friend, and he was chairman of the planning board. I'd been in the White House 2 weeks, I guess. I get a call from Irving. And how are things going? Fine. The feds are redesigning Route 2 from Alewife to Concord. I said, I remember, yeah. he said, you know what they want to do? They want to put this humongous cloverleaf in at the corner of Waltham Street and Route 2. You know where Kites End is,
Yep,
Wagon
yep,
Wheel,
yep.
Johnny Carroll. He said, we don't want that. That's going to ruin that whole part of town. So we want a half a cloverleaf at Waltham Street, a half a cloverleaf at Spring Street. Can you do anything? Well, the White House is wonderful because you say to the switchboard, would you get me the director of the Bureau of Public Roads? And when they get him on the phone, because they tell him the White House is calling, then they get you on the phone. You know, that old trick.
Right.
So I said, you know, the people in Lexington, half a cloverleaf at Waltham Street, half a cloverleaf at Spring Street. And that's what they want. And, obviously, I didn't tell them anything, just reporting, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks later, Irving called me. He's laughing. He said, well, it's all straightened out. That's what we're going to have. He said, but the Bureau of Public Roads in Boston can't figure out why on earth the White House cares about the design of Route 2 going through Lexington.
Dan, can you tell us any memories you have about November 22nd, 1963?
Anything you feel like you want to share with us about that?
I still don't, you know, and I walked through that part of the Kennedy Library, and I just watching those films. I was having lunch with a friend of mine in the State Department dining room. It's not a big room at all that day, and I remember somebody came in and handed a piece of paper to Assistant Secretary of State for Cultural Affairs, Luke Battle. Good guy. Used to be at Colonial Williamsburg, friend of mine. And Luke sort of half got out of his chair looking at this thing and said, the president's been shot, and the president of what? And then I heard John Connolly's name, so I knew the president of what. I went back to the White House. I'd left the White House by then. He'd appointed me commissioner on one of the federal commissions about 3 weeks before, next to last appointment before he died. But they all knew me, you know, the guards and everything. So I went in and spent the weekend working on the arrangements, as we all did. Word coming back from Air Force One from Jackie, just like this, what she wanted, right down to the smallest detail. And
So you worked with Jackie after the assassination for a bit?
just
a little bit.
Just the word was being.
Yeah.
I don't know who she was calling, because Sorensen might have been Ted Sorensen. Kenny O'Donnell was in Dallas. Dave Powers was in Dallas. So it might have been Ted she was talking to. Might
Shocking
have been Bobby,
times.
although I doubt it.
Yeah.
Quite
So,
a change.
after that difficult time, you were working on this council
Well, I
that he
was
appointed you
commissioner and
to
vice
commissioner.
chairman and acting chairman of the United States Tariff Commission, and that was great fun because we'd have these hearings and we'd go up to this bench with these big chairs, and I remember some pretty interesting moments. There was a guy representing the American date industry, you know, dates and nuts and stuff like that.
Oh, date, okay.
So he's testifying against lowering tariffs on imported pitted dates from Turkey. Oh, it's boring as hell. I'm playing tic
you're not a date guy.
with my commissioner, one of my commissioners, and eating no dose to keep awake. Then he said, and the Turkish pitted dates are pitted by mouth, you know.
Oh, jeez.
Well, I woke up at that, and I leaned over the bench, and I said, excuse me, what did you just say? Oh, yes, he said, they have these old men, and they sit there, and they get 6 dates in their mouth, and chew them a little bit, and then spit the pits out one side, then take the dates out and put them in a box.
Oh, how awful.
So you put a big tariff on those guys.
Yeah. I never had another pitted date from Turkey in my life.
I think I'm stepping back from them too.
So you stayed in Washington until what, 1968 or 9 or
69.
69, and then you came back to Lexington,
Right.
Because you still had your house in Lexington.
Well,
Or-
I sold the house.
Okay,
bought a
okay,
new
but you
one.
wanted to come back to
Yeah.
Lexington.
Oh, yeah.
And from what I understand, you kind of picked up where you left off. What did you do at that point?
Well, I was at the Harvard Business School. And I was there for a couple of years, and then they asked me to become founding director of the library,
Right, and
Kennedy Library,
what year was that then?
71.
Okay, and that's the same year of the John Kerry arrest on the Battle Green. So
Yeah,
I want
guess
you to
it was.
maybe
Were
tell
you
us
there,
about that
Dan?
too.
Huh?
Were you there that evening?
I was on Chincoteague Island, on the eastern shore of Maryland,
Good place
where
to
the
be.
ponies are.
Oh, that's right, the ponies.
But I made a little speech at the meeting that Bobby Cataldo ran 2 or 3 days later about it.
So a few of your friends got a bus ride that night, huh?
Huh?
A few of your friends got a bus ride that night.
Yes. I have very mixed feelings about that. In the first place, Kerry, of course, was setting it up. He wanted a confrontation. I think that Bobby was probably more stiff-necked than he should have been. People say that's when the Lexington kind of split between townies and newcomers, because an awful lot of newcomers came pouring in here in the 60s. And that's wrong. I think that what happened there was that brought to the fore the tension between
Okay,
old-time Lexingtonians
all right.
and all these new people who were quite different in many ways.
And a lot of the reason Lexington grew so much was because of 128.
Oh, yeah.
That was really what
Oh,
what made us a suburb.
Changed everything. Then.
Changed everything,
You know,
right.
it was changing a bit. 1960, Nixon won by 56%, as opposed to that 76% that Eisenhower had won Lexington by.
Well, Eisenhower was a war hero, too.
That's partly because people in Lexington they liked Eisenhower. They were moderate liberal Republicans. They hated Nixon. And it was partly because it was beginning to change. And people liked John Kennedy anyway. But by the time I came back in 69, big change.
Big change.
And then Link Cole got beaten by Steve Doran.
Oh, right.
As
remember.
rep. But he stayed on as moderator for a few years.
Oh yeah, but then the idea of a Democrat getting elected state rep was just
Right.
Yeah.
unheard of.
And a young whippersnapper at that.
Tell us about the Kennedy Library and Museum, because you were asked to be the inaugural director of it. And how long were you there, and what kind of a process was it? I understand finding a location for it was difficult.
It was supposed to be there at on what they now call JFK Street and Memorial Drive
In Cambridge, near
in
Harvard.
Cambridge. The MBTA marshalling yards were there. The problem was trying to find a place for the marshalling yards. Bob Wood, later president of UMass, became head of the MBTA, found the Dover Street yards in Southie, and it looked as if everything was fine. But then we ran into a little participatory democracy. You've never dealt with any of that. Citizen groups and people with placards and chants
Really?
and candles and stuff like that.
They really get into it, don't they?
Yeah, and they thought that the archives was nice, but they thought, because nice people go to archives and not many of them. But the museum, I got people in Bermuda shorts and
You just don't know who's going to show up in a
well,
museum,
I
right?
mean, they might even come from Springfield and Worcester for heaven's sake. Couldn't have any of that. So, big problem and nasty political fight. Some Harvard people wanted to split the museum and the archives and have the archives in Cambridge and the museum any place, Fort Leavenworth. And I fought that one pretty hard. And in 1969, the family whose project it was before they turned it over to the government, to us, settled on Columbia Point by a close vote.
And what was out there
So
when they picked the Columbia Point?
The town dump.
Right. Landfill.
And a
lot of seagulls.
housing project.
Okay.
Yeah,
So the family finally chose this location.
yeah, it was close.
And then you,
I remember
it.
Jackie. Jackie's when the people who wanted the Harvard split, and she came back from the family meeting and said, "How could you possibly put the Kennedy Library in South Boston and Dorchester?" Jackie adopted that foolish little schoolgirl voice, which wasn't her voice at all. Oh, I just did what I thought, what Teddy wanted. Just a lot of crap. She and Teddy voted for Columbia Point.
okay,
Well, that's what it took then.
okay.
So when that decision was made in
69.
69, and when did it open, Dan? The museum?
71.
And-
86.
71 to 80.
69, it was...
So it was decided
It
to
was
be.
70, what am I saying? We moved out there in 79.
60,
So that it would have been, we broke ground in 77, so it would have been 75 actually. Yeah.
and you
yeah,
were
when the
director
decision
until
was made. I was
86 or
director from 71 to 86.
71 to 86.
Yeah, we were Trapella Road in Waltham for a long time.
Oh, just warehouse there? Materials?
Well, yeah, except that we were open for business in the archives. We had
Oh,
research.
it's still there.
And
yeah.
we did a lot of program.
Oh,
We had exhibits around and film festivals and speakers, and we had, well, I remember Stuart Udall, who was Secretary of the Interior, wonderful guy, had him in Lowell for a day, looking at the canals and stuff they were developing in the museums, and a lot of other people who called community visitors. I wanted people first view of the library to be an active, program-oriented place. So that's why we did all this stuff beforehand.
When did you first become a Minuteman, Dan?
88.
And you've been one ever since?
Yeah, but I'm not quite as active as I used
That's
to.
okay.
You
That's
know,
all right.
but I don't get out there with
all right.
my musket and powder on April 19th anymore.
But this is your hat.
That's right.
Right.
I use
Yep.
it from time to time.
Who did you characterize? Who was your character?
Corporal Ebenezer Parker. It was
okay.
typecasting, Peter. He was 25, and his wife was 8 months pregnant when he was out there on the green.
Huh.
But I figure if I go out in the green, I can't get off fast enough, and the regulars will capture me, and that'll screw up the
That
whole
would screw up the whole story.
The right history all
That's
over
right.
again.
Now, another thing, if we've got another minute, your involvement with the Unitarian Church, I know has been very important to you over the years.
Yeah.
Want to tell us a little bit about that? The
Does
first
it have
parish?
something to do with this bobblehead thing, Dan?
Yeah, now this is Ebenezer Scrooge.
Oh, yes.
And I'll be reading again the Christmas Carol on the afternoon, 4 o'clock of the afternoon of December 4th.
Fourth, okay.
And that's not for the church, it's for the community. And it's very, very nice. We light a fire in the fireplace, and I read the
We've been there.
carol, and that's right.
Yep.
And hot cocoa and cookies, and it's about including the intermission with the hot cocoa, it's maybe an hour and a half, an hour and three-quarters.
And how long have you been doing that now? Quite some time.
You know, it must be a decade, must be 10 years.
And you met Charles Dickens's great
Thanks to
grandson.
you, yeah.
Easy.
Listen to him.
Yeah,
It was-
no, that was an
He was
interesting
over the
evening,
house one
wasn't it?
night. We knew you wanted to meet.
Yeah, right. That was fun.
And you're still teaching at Harvard now,
Yeah,
right?
I taught a class this morning.
This morning.
And you were teaching down in Virginia, too, for a
Well, I
long time, right?
taught all over the place in South Carolina.
South
and-
Carolina.
Yeah, but now it's just at the Kennedy School.
Okay, okay.
And talking about the Historical Society,
Oh.
there's something else that I'm really concerned about, and we've got to do something about. We lost actually this month one of our 17th century houses, which was on Hayes Lane. And it was a Wellington house, part thereof. Been moved from Fletcher, the corner of Fletcher and Mass Ave.
That's the Conscious Corner, right? The house.
That's where the Wellington
Right.
house was.
And it was moved off of there probably in
Oh,
the 50s,
ages ago.
60s.
Yeah, ages ago.
Moved up to
but-
Hayes Avenue, Hayes
Hayes
Lane.
Lane.
Right, and gone.
They tore
And
it
that's-
down?
Yeah, and that's the second.
I wasn't aware of
House.
that. The Historic Commission, which tries to...
Well, sure, but see, that's the thing. They can put a stay on it for a year, and
that-
during that time, the owner is supposed to try and find a locate.
What a shame. And what year was
Down
it built?
goes.
What, built in the 1600s?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, what a shame.
And
I didn't
so
think
there
about that.
are some buildings, not many, right, that are outside the historic district that go back to the 17th century.
It wasn't uncommon for them to move houses.
Oh
No,
no,
not at
time.
all.
them all the time.
Right.
So they're outside the district, and that means that for all intents and purposes, they don't have any protection.
Well, that should be
And,
changed.
we ought to do something.
Yes, we should,
There were certain
absolutely.
houses, it sounds like the Wellington House being one of them. Do you recall it being, was it facing on the avenue or on Fletcher?
Say, I don't remember. Sam Doran knows
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay.
But got to do something about it.
Right, I would agree. I would, absolutely. Two more things. You want to tell us what you feel are the most interesting changes that have taken place in Lexington in your 93 years?
Whoa.
I mean, that's very, no, I know you weren't here 93 years, but it's a very broad question, but we're really running out of time, and I'm looking for a sort of a general
You've been
answer.
through a number of generations and decades.
Decades.
In the community.
The flavor of the town has changed enormously.
It's not vanilla
I
anymore.
remember in the late 50s being very worried about the tension between the Irish and the Italians and the Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to a guy named John Judge, who was kind of a specialist in this stuff. And, you know, what can we do about this? And of course, a Jewish family, you couldn't buy a house in town, maybe just a few places. So
So the ethnicity has changed a lot.
That's really changed, and this business of 25% of our community being Asian and Indian, that's dramatically different.
Yep.
The politics of the way it used to be with paper ballots. You know, there was a state law that when there's 50 ballots in the box, you can start counting them.
Huh.
Well, it was theoretically so that the poll watchers could get home early, but that wasn't the real reason.
They wanted to know where the numbers were.
Of course, and the word would go out from the polling places to the Hancock Men's Club that ran the town.
Oh.
You know, that group of people.
Yeah.
And they'd
It's our church.
call houses and tell them to get down and vote.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, listen, our guy is behind George Emery and Don Nickerson
Emery.
and Ruth
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Alan Adams. They
All the old
they
town.
get together and decide who could run and who couldn't run.
That went on for years.
Oh,
Right.
yes.
Right.
Oh, yes.
I
So it's much more open than it
Right.
was in those days.
Much more inclusive,
Yeah.
much more accepting of everyone.
Yeah. You know, been involved in a lot of different things, but my 4 sons and daughters and 3 step sons and daughters and my 14 grandchildren and now my first great-grandchild lives in Arlington. That's the most. They're the most important parts of my life, and this picture of Gwendolyn Huntington Silver. She was born in February. This was taken shortly thereafter. I thought it was extremely appropriate that I've got my mouth open, I'm talking obviously, and she's got her fingers in her ears. Good for her, she's a smart kid.
He's an early learner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great grandpa's here.
Yeah.
Time to plug the
I think
music.
that's
Time to go to sleep.
I think that's very nice. All you've been through in your life, and it comes down to family.
That's right.
Yep.
That's all the important stuff.
I would just like to say thank you so much, Dan. You have had an incredible career, and we are just lucky to have you in Lexington.
And stay around for a while, will you?
Yeah. Well, you're
And
very
keep up all
kind
your
to say
good
so.
work.
I'm
So,
flattered.
thank you.
Thanks a lot, bud.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.